Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Tranaya Karuna Gana Ganatam Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Tranaya Karuna Gana Gana Praptasya Kalyana Gunana Vasya Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Mahaprabhu Kirtana Nitya Gita Vaditra Madhya Manasura Seno Romanchakam Pasru Taranga Bhajo Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Shri Vigrahara Dana Nityanana Shringaratanma Niramajanado Shikha Juktasya Bhaktamsya Niyunjatopi Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Chaturvedha Shri Bhagavat Prasada Satvana Truptan Haribhakta Sangha Chaturvedha Shri Bhagavat Prasada Satvana Truptan Kritvaiva Trupti Bhajata Shadeva Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Kritvaiva Shradikama Dabayara Para Madhura Lila Gunarupanamna Shradikama Pratikchanasa Tanalalopasya Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Kunjayono Rati Kelisidhyai Yaya Livir Jukti apekshaniya Nikunjani Tatra tidaksha Ativalabhasya Vande Gurashi Charanarvindam Sakshat Haridvainam Shamasta Shastri Ruktastathava Gataiva Sadhavi Sakshat Haridvainam Into Prabhuja Priya eva tasya Vande Gurashi Charanaro Vrindam Yasya prasadam Bhagavat prasadam Yasya prasadam Nagati kutapi Yasya prasadam Dayam stubam tasya Yasatri sanyam Vande Gurashi Charanaravinam Vande Gurashi Charanaravinam Vande Gurashi Charanaravinam Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nidvishesham Shunyavadi Pachatyadi Shatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gora Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Tanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Gaur Nityananda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Hariharaya Namah Krishna Jadavaya Namah Jadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Namah Hare Gopal Govindaram Shri Madhusudan Giridhari Gopinath Madana Mohan Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Sita Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavata Gita Shri Rupa Sanatan Vataraguna Shri Jiva Gopala Vata Dasaraguna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Radha Nila Madhava Radha Nila Madhava Radhe Jaya Jagannatha Jaya Baladeva Jaya Subhadrama Jaya Sudarshan Chakra Jaya Sitaram Jaya Sitaram Jaya Sitaram Jaya Lakshma Bhaktanuma Jaya Lakshmi Narasingha Jaya Lakshmi Narasingha Lakshmi Narasingha Jaya Prahlad Maharaj Netai Gaura Haribo 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo 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 Nitai Gaura Jai Om Vishwapar Paramahansa Prabhajakacharya Sutta Sarasi Shri Maharaj Divine Grace Abhay Charavina Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Shri Prabhupada ki jai ISKCON Pratishtha Viviti Samstavakacharya Vaishnava Ceremony Patit Pavana Shri Prabhupada ki jai Shri Gurya Guru Varga Patita Udhara ki jai Shri Rup Sanatan Bhata Raghunatha Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Gunasat Goswami Prabhu ki jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ji ki jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai प्रेम से कहो से कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासारी गौर भक्तवृंद की जय परम दयाल से नित्यानंद प्रभु की जय प्रेम नाम संकीर्तन एक जनाक प्रेम पुरुषोत्तम सच्चिनंदन श्रीमान गौरांग चैतन्य महाप्रभु गौर हरि महावतार की जय गोलोकेर प्रमधान नाम संकीर्तन यज्ञ की जय जुग धर्म हरे कृष्ण महामंत्र की जय बृहद निदांग ट्रांसलेट बुक डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन सेवा की जय श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपना राधा कुंज समकुंज गिरिराज गोवर्धन की जय श्री ब्रजभूमि वृंदावन मथुर राम की जय तेलो शिव श्री राम नील माधव की जय श्री मायापुर मध्य कतनाम की जय परम करुण श्री गौर निताय की जय श्री पुरुषोत्तम कित्र जगन्नाथ धाम की जय श्री जगन्नाथ स्वामी बलदेव प्रभु देवी सुदर्शन चक्र भगवान की जय भक्ति सर्व विघ्न विनाशना करें सिंहदेव भगवान की जय सीताराम लक्ष्मण भक्त हनुमान जी की जय जगंगा माय जमुना माई की जय तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी भक्ति देवी की जय श्रीमती राधा रानी की Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Nitai Gaurari Pramanandi Haribo. All glory to the Sambil Bodies. All glory to the Sambil Bodies. All glory to the Sambil Bodies. All glories, to Shri Guru Shri Gauram. Jaya Silatanka
Shilatanka Nakhalai Shilatanka Nakhalai Ito Narasimha Parato Narasimha Yeto yeto yamitato narasimha
Jatta jatta ja mitato nishinga
Yeto yeto yamitato narasimha
Jatta jatta ja mitato nishinga
Bahe narasimha hrudaye narasimha
Bahe narasimha hrudaye narasimha
Bahe narasimha hrudaye narasimha
Bahe narasimha hrudaye narasimha
Narasimha madim sharanam prapadhe
Narasimha madim sharanam prapadhe
Narasimha madim sharanam prapadhe
Narasimha madim sharanam prapadhe
Tava kara kamalavare Naka madhuta shrunga Dalita hiranyakashipu Tanubrunga Keshavadrita narahari rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare
Tava kara kamalavare Naka adbhuta shringa Davita hiranyakasipu Tanobringa Kesavadita naradirupa Jai Jagadisha Jai Jagadisha Jai Jagadisha
Keshavadrita narahari rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare
Kesavadita naradirupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadish Hare, Jai Jagadish Hare.
Jayo Narasimha Dev, Jayo Narasimha Dev, Jayo Narasimha Dev, Jayo Narasimha Dev.
Jaya Nisingade, Nisingade, Jayo Nisingade, Jayo Nisingade.
Jayo Prahlad Maharaj, Jayo Prahlad Maharaj, Jayo Prahlad Maharaj, Jayo Prahlad Maharaj.
Jaya Prahlad Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, Jaya Prahlad Maharaj.
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev.
Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev.
Jai.
श्री भक्ति परसर विघ्नाशना कनु सिंहदेव भगवान की जय, भक्त श्रेष्ठ प्रहलाद महाराज की जय, गौर हरि परमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। श्री वृंदाई तुलसी देवाई प्रिय केशव सत्य, विष्णु भक्ति प्रदे सतवतय नमो नमः। वृंदाई तुलसी देवाई प्रिय केशव सत्य, विष्णु भक्ति प्रदे सतवतय नमो नमः। वृंदाई तुलसी देवाय प्रिय केशव सत्य, विष्णु भक्ति प्रदे देवी सतवतय नमो नमः। श्रीमती तुलसी महारानी वृंदा देवी की।
प्रेयसी नमो नमः।
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः।
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः।
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः।
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पाबो अभिलाषी।
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो अभिलाषी।
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पाबो अभिलाषी।
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो अभिलाषी।
ये तुम्हार शरण लोय सारवंच पूर्ण होय
ते तुम्हारा शरणाला सारवंच पूर्ण
कृपा कोरी कोरो तारे वृंदावन वासी
तुम्हें कृपा कोरी तारे वृंदावन वासी
मोरा ये अभिलाष विलास कुंज दियो
विलास कुंज
नयने हेरी बो सदा युगल रूपरासी
अमिनायने विभूषद जुगल रूपरासी
हे निवेदन दारो सखीरानुगाता कोरो
हे निवेदन सखीरानु गाता कोरो
सेवाधिकारा दिए कोरो निज दासी
सेवायादि करदिए करने गदासी
दीना कृष्ण दासे कोई न मोरा होय
दीना कृष्ण दास कोई न मोरा
दीना कृष्ण दासे कोई न मोरा होय
दीना कृष्ण दास कोई न मोरा
श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदा ये न बासी
श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेम सदा ये न बासी
श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदा ये न बासी
श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदा ये न बासी
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिण पादे पदे
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्म अत्यधिकानि तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिण पादे पदे
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति
प्रदक्षिण पादे पदे हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Vrinda Devi.
Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Tulsi, Jaya Tulsi.
Jaya Vrinde, Jaya Vrinde, Jaya Vrinde, Jaya Shri Vrinde.
Jaya Vrinde, Jaya Vrinde, Jaya Vrinde, Jaya Vrinde.
Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol.
Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Shri Vrindai Tulasi Vai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Sattvatai Namo Namo. Vrindayai Tulasi Vai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Sattvatai Namo Namo. Vrindayai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Sattvatai Namo Namo. Shrimati Tulasi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki. O Tulasi, beloved Krishna, I bow before you again and again. My desire to obtain the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of you has wishes fulfilled, bestow your mercy upon him, you make him resident of Vrindavan. My desire is that you also give me a residence in pleasure groves of Sri Vrindavan Dham. Thus, within my vision, I will always behold the beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower with the damsels of Raj. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me your own maid servant. This very fallen and lowly servant Krishna prays. May I always swim in love, Shri Radha, Govind, Shri Mati Tulasi Maharani Vrindadevi ki jai. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Krishnakam ki jai. Chito Darpanam Ajanam Bhavamagavagnivajanam Dharanam Vidyavadhu Jivanam Anandam Jivanam Vipadam Nam Lasaranam Jai Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Krishnakam ki jai. Glory to Shri Krishna Sankirtan. It cleanses the heart with the dust and accumulates for years and extinguishes the fire of conditioned life and repeated birth and death. The Sankirtan movement is a prime benediction for humanity at large. Lord is praised the rays of the benediction movement. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we are always anxious. Oh my Lord, your name alone can render all benediction to living beings. And thus you have 100 millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names you have invested all your transcendental energy. You know the hard and fast rules for chanting these names. Oh my Lord, I find it you never left easy to push you to the good name. Once you chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, think of oneself a Lord on a stroll in the street. One should be more taller than a tree. In God the world stands of all prestige. We should be ready to offer our respect to others. In such state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. Oh Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth. Nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your cause as devotional service, birth after birth. O Son of Maharajananda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor, yet somehow or other I have fallen in this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. My Lord, or will my eyes will be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy names? Or will my body stand on the end on the recitation of your holy name? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I consider a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I feel all vacant anywhere in your absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and he should remain so, even if sunders me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completed to do anything and everything. But he's always my worshipful Lord unconditionally. Shri Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Krishna Kam Ki Jai. They are our offenses since by the chanting of the Lord that not be avoided. They are as follows. 1. Blaspheme devotees who dedicate their life for breaking, forget my own name. 2. Consider names of demigods, our Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma, to be equal to independent of the name Lord Vishnu. 3. To disobey the orders of the spiritual master. 4. Blaspheme the Vedic literature or literatures and pursuits of Vedic version. 5. To consider the glory of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. 6. To give some interpretation on holy name of the Lord. 7. To commit sinful activities on strength of chanting the holy name of the Lord. 8. To consider chanting for Hare Krishna is one of the auspicious ritualistic activities which are offered in Vedas as fruit of activity karma kanda. 9. To instruct the faithless person by the glories of holy name. And 10. To not have complete faith in chanting the holy names and mundane material attachments, even of understanding so many instructions on this matter. It also affirms in attain to well chanting. Every devotee who claims to be Vaishnava must carefully guide against his stand offenses in order to quickly achieve the desired success, Krishna Prema. Now let us offer our respectful obeisances unto all Vaishnavas devoted to the Lord. They are just like desire trees, they can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen and conditioned souls. Vancha.
Ipasanavyeva patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo namo namaha. Vaishnava Thakur ki jai. Om Srimad Bhagavatam Grantaraj ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Janmadyasya yato nivayat itaratas charte swavigyaswarat.
Janmadyasya yatam vayaditaratas chati swavigyasvarat.
Tene Brahma Hridaya Adhikavaye Muyanti Yat Surayaha.
Tene Brahma Hridaya Adhikavaye Muyanti Yat Suraya.
Tejo Varimidam Yata Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Misha.
Tejo Varimidam Yata Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Misha.
Damna Svena Sadar Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Parandi Mahi.
Damna Svena Sadar Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Parandi Mahi.
O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva.
O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva.
O all-pervading personality of Godhead.
O all-pervading personality of Godhead.
For my respectful obeisances unto you.
I offer my respectful obeisances unto you.
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute
and
truth.
The primeval cause of all causes.
And the primeval cause of all causes.
The creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes.
Of the creation, sustenance, destruction of the manifested universes.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
And he is independent because there's no other cause beyond him.
And he is independent because there's no other cause beyond him.
It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji.
It's she only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji.
The original living being.
The original living being.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
As one is bewildered by the illusory representations of the material world.
As one is bewildered by the illusory representations of the material world.
Of water seen on fire or land seen on water.
Of water seen to fire, land seen on water.
Only because of him do the material universes.
Only because of him do the material universes.
Temporarily manifested by reactions of the three modes of nature.
Temporarily manifested by the reaction of the three modes of nature.
Appear factual, although they are unreal.
Appear factual, although they are unreal.
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna.
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna.
Who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode.
Who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode.
Which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world.
Which is forever free from the illusory representation of the material world.
I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute
Dharma projita kaitravota.
Dharma Prujita Kaitavutru
Paramo Nirmatsaranam Satam
Paramo Nirmasaranam Satam
Vedyam Vastavam Atra Vastu
Vidya Vastavamastro Vastu
Shivadam Tapa Trayon Mulanam
Shivadam Taputrayomulanam
Shrimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite
Shimad Bhagavati Mahamuni
Kim Vaparir Ishwaraha
Kimva Paririshvaraha
Sadyo Hridi Avarudyate Tra
Satyurudya Pariritra
Krite Bihi Sususabhistakshanat.
Kritivihi Shushushu Bhistasya
Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated.
Completely rejecting all religious activities which are material.
This Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth,
This Bhagavad Purana propounds the highest truth,
which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart.
which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in
The
heart.
highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
It has to be the reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
Such truth uproots the threefold miseries.
Such truth uproot the threefold
This
miseries.
beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity,
It's beautiful Bhagavatam compiled with the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity.
is sufficient in itself for God realization.
It's sufficient himself of God realization.
What is the need of any other scripture?
What is the need of the other scripture?
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam,
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam,
by this culture of knowledge,
by this culture of knowledge,
the Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
the Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam
Nigama Kalpataror Kalitam Phalam
sukamukad amrita dravya samyatam
Shukamakadamrita Travasantam
pipata rasayam pipata bhagavatam rasayam pipata bhagavatam rasam alayam
Pibata Bhagavatam Rasa Marayam
muhur ahoraska bhuvibhavukaha.
Murahorasika Bhuvivav.
O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam,
O expert and thoughtful men, relish
the
Mahabharata.
mature fruit of the dietary Vedic literatures.
Like your food anxiety of Vedic literature
It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami.
is emanated from the lips of Sri Shukadev Goswami.
Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful.
Therefore, this food has become even more tasteful.
Although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all,
Although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all,
including liberated souls.
including liberated souls.
Shinvatam Swakata Krishna,
Shambhatam Swakata Krishna,
Punya Shravana Kirtana,
Punya Shravana Kirtana,
Hiryantaksto hi abhadrani,
Hridyantasto Hya Bhadrani,
Vidunati Srihitsatam.
Vidu Noti Suritsatam.
To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures,
To hear about Krishna from the Vedic
or
literature,
to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita,
or to hear from it directly through Bhagavad Gita,
is itself righteous activity.
it is self-righteous activity.
And for one who hears about Krishna,
And for one who hears about Krishna,
Lord Krishna is dwelling in everyone's heart,
Lord Krishna is dwelling within everyone's heart,
acts as a best wishing friend,
acts as the best wishing
and
friend,
purifies the devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him.
and purifies the devotee who's constantly engaged with hearing him.
Nasta presu bhadresu
Nasta Praishra Bhadrishu
nityam bhagavata sevaya
Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya
bhagavati uttama sloke
Bhagavati Uttama Shloki
bhaktir bhavati naistaki.
Bhakti Bhavati Nastiki.
In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge.
In this way, the devotee naturally develops his transcendental knowledge.
As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
But he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
and from the devotees,
and from the devotees.
he becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord.
He becomes fixed in devotional service of the Lord.
Tadarajas tamo bhava
Tada Rajastamo Bhavo
kamalobha dayaschaye
Kamalobhadayaschaye
cheta etar anavidam
Chaita Itarana Vedam
stitvam sattve prasidati.
Stitam Salva Prasidati.
By development of devotional service,
By development of devotional service,
one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance,
one becomes freed from the modes of passion of ignorance.
and thus material lust and avarice are diminished.
And thus material lust and avarice are diminished.
Evam prasana manaso
Evam prasanna manaso
bhagavat bhakti yogataha
Bhagavat Bhakti Yogata
bhagavat tattva vijnanam
Bhagavat Tattva Vijnana
sangasya jayate.
Mukta Sangasya Jayate.
When these impurities are wiped away,
But these impurities are wept away.
the candidate remains steady in his position of pure
The
goodness,
candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness,
becomes enlivened by devotional service,
becomes enlivened by devotional service,
and understands the science of God perfectly.
and understands the science of God perfectly.
Vidyate hridaya grantis.
Vidyate hridaya granthi.
Chidyante sarva samsaya.
Chidyante sarva samshaya.
Shiyante chasyakarmani.
Chidyante
Drista
shachakarmani.
evat manishware.
Yuta ivatmani ishvari.
Thus, Bhakti Yoga severs the hard knot of material affection
Thus the Bhakti Yoga severs the hard knot of material affection
and enables one to come at once to the stage of a samsayam samagram,
and enables us to come at once to the stage of samasham samadhana.
understanding of the supreme absolute truth, personality, personality Godhead.
Understanding the supreme absolute true personality of God.
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna and from his devotees
in Krishna consciousness
in Krishna consciousness
can one understand the science of Krishna.
can one understand the science.
Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 18, verse number 23.
24?
Is it 24?
Yeah. 24 and
What?
24 and 25.
What?
24 and 25 combined together.
We did 23 yesterday?
We did, yes.
Okay. Ekadadanur udyamana
Ekada danur udyamya
vicharan mrigayam vane
vicharan mrigaya vane
mrigan anugata stvanta
mrigan anugata shanta
shuditas trisito brisham
joditas tristo Krishna
jalasayam akakshana
Jalashayam achakshana
pravivesatam ashramam
pravishitam ashanam
tadarsa munim asinam
Tadarshamunim ashinam
santam milita lochanam.
Shantam milita luchanam.
Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Once upon a time, Maharaj Parikshit, while engaged in hunting in a forest with bow and arrows, became extremely fatigued, hungry, and thirsty while following the stags. The stags are female. I think it's the female deer. Or it might refer to all deer. I'm not sure. While searching for a reservoir of water, he entered the hermitage of the well-known Samika Rishi and saw the sage sitting silently with closed eyes. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The Supreme Lord is so kind to his pure devotees that in proper time he calls such devotees up to him and thus creates an auspicious circumstance for the devotee. Maharaj Parikshit was a pure devotee of the Lord, and there was no reason for him to become extremely fatigued, hungry, and thirsty, because a devotee of the Lord never becomes perturbed by such bodily demands. But by the desire of the Lord, even such a devotee can become apparently fatigued, thirsty, just to create a situation favorable for his renunciation of worldly activities. One has to give up all attachment for worldly relations before one is able to go back to Godhead. Thus, when a devotee is too much absorbed in worldly affairs, the Lord creates a situation to cause indifference. In other words, indifference means he doesn't care about, he doesn't have any material attachments. The Supreme Lord never forgets his pure devotee, even though he may be engaged in so-called worldly affairs. Sometimes he creates an awkward situation, and the devotee becomes obliged to renounce all worldly affairs. The devotee can understand by the signal of the Lord, but others take it to be unfavorable and frustrating. Maharaj Parikshit was to become the medium for the revelation of Srimad Bhagavatam by the Lord Shri Krishna. As his grandfather, Arjuna, was the medium for the Bhagavad Gita, Had Arjuna not been taken up with an illusion of family affection by the will of the Lord, the Bhagavad Gita would not have been spoken by the Lord himself for the good of all concerned. Similarly, Maharaj Parikshit, not being fatigued, hungry, and thirsty at this time, Srimad Bhagavatam would not have been spoken by Srila Sukadeva Goswami, the prime authority of Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is a prelude to the circumstances under which Srimad Bhagavatam was spoken for the benefit of all concerned. The prelude, therefore, begins with the words, "Once upon a time." Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So this has a lot of precious information in it, revealing how some aspects of the Lord's relationship with his devotees. At any time, Krishna can decide that his devotee is needed elsewhere and can precipitate a situation and the devotee seems to be abruptly taken away from the association of other devotees. And sometimes people interpret that as being unfavorable and sad. But actually, it's the mercy of the Lord. Therefore, a devotee is always ready at any time to renounce everything and go back to Godhead. That is very hard for most people to understand. And it can be hard for a devotee to understand. Therefore, these explanations help us to understand different aspects of the Lord's mercy for his devotee. So he said, Prabhupada's explaining here that Maharaj Parikshit's hunger, fatigue, and thirst, his being perturbed by them, was not an ordinary thing. It was strange because a devotee knows how to tolerate unfavorable situations related to the body. But in this case, Maharaj Parikshit sought out some way to satisfy his fatigue, hungry, and thirst. So, Prabhupada says, but by the desire of the Lord, even such a devotee can become apparently fatigued and thirsty just to create a situation favorable for his renunciation of worldly activities. That's the point. We should be able to read the writing on the wall. This is a saying from the Bible, actually. I think it's about Nebuchadnezzar. He was a demoniac Persian king who forcefully took the Jews out of their so-called homeland, or Israel, and put them into captivity again. They were already in captivity under the Egyptians. They got freed from that by I think it was Abraham. Okay. No, Moses. I'm sorry, Moses. And they went to the promised land, so-called Israel. But then they were instrumental in crucifying Jesus Christ. And 70 years later, they were forced to leave their so-called homeland and go back into captivity by this demoniac, so-called demoniac king. And at one point, something happened, and there was, I'm not getting the story exactly right, but there was this writing on the wall that Nebuchadnezzar was going to become like a wild animal like lose his mind and go into a complete illusion. And it actually happened. So the writing on the walls is a phrase of some kind of prophecy, or that something horrible is going to happen. So the fact that Maharaj Yudhisthira, in this case, it's not something horrible that's going to happen, but it's something's going to happen. And what is it? He's going to be cursed by the son of the Samika Rishi, by his son, who is not really a qualified son of a Brahmana. He's like a Dvijabandhu, an unqualified son of a Brahmana. And he unnecessarily gets angry because Maharaj Parikshit did something that he was convinced insulted his father. Well, we will read about that later on. So Prabhupada says that by the desire of the Lord, even such a devotee can become apparently fatigued and thirsty just to create a situation favorable for his renunciation of worldly activities. Now, this is an important statement because a devotee should be ready at any moment to renounce all worldly activities. Because although the devotee may seem to be attached to family, children, obligations, etc., internally, by this regular hearing process and discussing Vedic knowledge in the company of devotees, internally the devotee develops detachment. Externally, he acts as if he's a henpecked husband or a attached wife. Right? So these are things that you understand gradually as you read more and more about the activities of great devotees, like Maharaj Priyavrata, or in this case, Maharaj Parikshit. This externally seeming to be attached, internally developing detachment, well, that's going to be tested. And it's tested in the case of Maharaj Parikshit, where he passed the test. He could have easily countered the curse of Samika Rishi's son. He could have easily countered it. He had the power to do that. But he refused to do it because he realized this was the plan of the Lord, and it was time for him to end his pastimes. It was time for Maharaj Parikshit to end his sojourn in the material world, and he's being basically called by the Lord for doing service somewhere else. So Prabhupada says, sometimes he, meaning Krishna, creates an awkward situation, and the devotee becomes obliged to renounce all worldly affairs. The devotee can understand by the signal of the Lord, but others take it to be unfavorable and frustrating. Maharaj Parikshit was to become the medium for the revelation of Srimad Bhagavatam by Lord Shri Krishna, as his grandfather Arjuna was the medium for the Bhagavad Gita. Had Arjuna not been taken up with an illusion of family affection by the will of the Lord, the Bhagavad Gita would not have been spoken by the Lord himself for the good of all concerned. So this is an important statement, and this is also explained by Prabhupada in the Bhagavad Gita about Arjuna. What was Arjuna's problem? Well, Prabhupada explains it in several different places. And it is so in one place is page 16 in the introduction of Bhagavad Gita. Right away, you see, Prabhupada gets to the main point of Arjuna's dilemma. What was it? the same thing that we just read. That is, there are many examples given of how we are to utilize those things which are set aside for us by the Lord. This is also explained in Bhagavad Gita. In the beginning, Arjuna decided that he should not fight in the battle of Kurukshetra. This was his own decision. Arjuna told the Lord that it was not possible for him to enjoy the kingdom after killing his own kinsman. This decision was based on the body because he was thinking that the body was himself and that his bodily relations or expansions were his brothers, nephews, brothers-in-law, grandfathers, and so on. Therefore, he wanted to satisfy his bodily demands. Arjuna was spoken, Bhagavad Gita was spoken by the Lord just to change this view. And at the end, Arjuna decides to fight under the directions of the Lord when he says, Karishya vachanam tava, I shall act according to your word. So, what was the problem with Arjuna? Well, it starts with identifying with the body. His decision to refuse Krishna's orders based on the body, because he's thinking that the body was himself and that his bodily relations or expansions were his brothers, nephews, brothers-in-law, godfathers, grandfathers, and so on. Therefore, he wanted to satisfy his bodily demands. You see how convoluted or just complicated is the simple acceptance that I am this body. It extends into a whole network of false attachments. And what is that network about? Refusing to follow Krishna's order. So to break that powerful network, just like if you have, for example, a rug that's not made only by machines, but made by hand. It's hard to take it apart. You would have to start pulling one thread at a time to take it apart because it's so tightly bound. I don't know if you've ever seen anyone making a rug, but it's quite a long endeavor, the handmade rugs. It can take 3 or 4 months to make one, with all the designs and everything, the different colors of threads, and the threads are pulled horizontally and vertically. So, and they pull them really tight. It was by hand and by some contraption that they make. So to take it apart is really hard. Those type of rugs can last for 3, 4, 5, 6 generations. You know, each generation is like 30, 40 years. So they can last a long time. Well, in the same way, beginning with I am this body, a very, very complicated mesh of attachments evolves over time, and it can be even generational. And it's almost impossible to break it. So we see the decision of Arjuna was based on the body because he was thinking that the body was himself and that his bodily relations or expansions were his brothers, nephews, brothers-in-law, grandfathers, and so on. Therefore, he wanted to satisfy his bodily demands. And because of that, he's rejecting Krishna's order. Also, in another place, Prabhupada says, again in the introduction on page 8, he says that Arjuna was above illusion because he was a direct associate of the Lord. How can he be put into illusion? Right? Let's see what it says. Being an associate of Lord Krishna, Arjuna was above all ignorance. But Arjuna was put into ignorance on the battlefield of Kurukshetra just to question Lord Krishna about the problems of life so that the Lord could explain them for the benefit of future generations of human beings and chalk out the plan of life. Then man could act accordingly and perfect the mission of human life. So Krishna is using Arjuna just like he's using Maharaj Parikshit to be able to expound Vedic knowledge factually and truthfully for the benefit of all people. Who else can explain the Vedas better than Krishna himself, who's the author of the Vedas, the knower of the Vedas? And who else can extract the essence or the sar of all Vedic knowledge better than Krishna? Nobody. So therefore, hearing Krishna and Bhagavad Gita as it is, and Srimad Bhagavatam as it was factually spoken, is the only remedy for all human problems. There's no other remedy. You might say, oh, no, Trump just came up with the vaccine, that's a remedy. No. Or, oh, yeah, there's a remedy, you merge into Brahman, there's no more problems. No, that's not a fact, that's false. Or you follow a Sadguru. No, that's nonsense also. You cannot be a guru unless you're repeating Krishna's words. By the way, what does Sadguru say? It's very interesting what he says. Some of our devotees went to his meeting, I think about maybe 8, 9 years ago, and they listened to what he said. And he said, you don't trust your neighbor. Why would you trust a book like Bhagavad Gita that was written so long ago, 5,000 years ago? I am here. What do you care about Rama or Krishna said? I am here with bone and flesh. Why don't you believe what I am saying? These are exact words. You don't trust your neighbors. Why would you trust a 5,000-year-old book like Bhagavad Gita? You see? You see how nonsense these people are. But the nonsense people accept it, right? And one time in University Heights, we rented a room for giving classes, and some students from Indian students came. One American guy came also, and I was explaining. I started from page 1 of the Prabhupada's book, the science. What is it? Yes, science of self-realization. Right. So in the beginning, Prabhupada makes certain points about how Krishna is the original scientist or the original source of all knowledge, and you have to learn directly from the words of Krishna, and something like that, and that one should avoid all speculators and Mayavadis who claim that the ultimate is the impersonal Brahman and so forth. So after the class was over, one boy came up to me and said, "Can I speak to you, please? But it should be private." I said, "What do you mean private?" Said, "Well, I have something very important to tell you, and it's essential, and I think you have to hear this, but I don't want to say it in front of everybody else." I said, "Okay." So we walked a little bit away, and he said, "Everything you said today was wrong." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Then what's right?" He said, "Well, Sadhguru says that why read an old book like the Bhagavad Gita when he's present? He's the manifested avatar of this age." I said, "Well, I'm sorry to put a pin into your balloon of ignorance, but what he said is not true." "How can you say such a thing?" I said, "Because it's true. Because Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, not this Asat Guru." "Why? I've never heard that before." "Well, you just heard it now, So you see, these people are completely ignorant, and they go to hear someone that's more ignorant than them, and they believe him. You know, and he's directly insulting Krishna. So, and then this boy was so convinced that everything I said was wrong, although I was just reading from Prabhupada's Science of Self-Realization and explaining it. So this is what we're up against today. And it's due to all these rascals claiming to be avatars or whatever. You know, there's so many people that claim to be the present avatar, you know. And it becomes very difficult for honest people to present the philosophy of Krishna consciousness as it is. Now, this becomes even more complicated. Like, for example, Prabhupada explains something very interesting. And he says, he takes a quote from Dr. Radhakrishnan. Now, Dr. Radhakrishnan, at one point, was president of India. He's a very prominent person, and he's written many books about Vedic philosophy in South India, right? And Prabhupada analyzes one thing. He says, Lord Krishna spoke these words to Arjuna so that he would surrender to him. So he's talking about Sarvadharman Parityaja Mamekam Saranam Vraja. The Sanskrit word saranam in this Gita text means surrender. On page 62 of his introductory essay, Dr. Radhakrishnan has also discussed the idea of surrender in some detail. He writes, prapati is Sri Vaishnavas use that word, but it's a Sanskrit word, it's a bona fide word. It means the same as sharanam, surrender, right? Surrendering to Krishna. Prapati, and this is Dr. Radhakrishnan writing, Prapati, surrender, has the following accessories. Goodwill to all, anukulyasya sankalpa, 1. 2. Absence of ill will, pratikulyasya varjanam. 3. Faith that the Lord will protect, raksisyai titi vishvasa. 4. Resort to him as Savior, gotritre varanam. 5. The sense of utter helplessness, karpanyam. And 6. Complete surrender, atmaniksepa. Now, for the person who's not really educated, they would read this and say, wow, that makes sense. Did it sound good to you? How did it sound? Huh? Yeah, it sounded good. It sounded like it's right. Huh? Let's hear what Prabhupada says. These 6 limbs of surrender should be followed in relation to Krishna or Vishnu, because this instruction on the process of surrender appears in a Vaishnava scripture. Dr. Radhakrishnan has translated the first limb, anukulyasya sankalpa, as goodwill to all. Question: is it possible to surrender to everyone? Say, surrender should be directed toward the Supreme Lord alone. Dr. Radhakrishnan's proposal is impractical and indeed impossible. Long before Dr. Radhakrishnan wrote his commentary, many realized spiritual preceptors, including the famous Goswamis of Vrindavana, explained the words anukulyasya sankalpa mean that one should render transcendental loving service to the Supreme Lord Krishna favorably. No genuine scholar would be willing to disregard all other spiritual authorities and accept Dr. Radhakrishnan's version. Wow, right from the beginning, Prabhupada rejects what Dr. Radhakrishnan wrote, even though it sounded good. And the other point is that this word prapati is spoken of in very great detail by the Sri Vaishnavas. And basically they say you must surrender to Sriman Narayana. But Dr. Radhakrishna ignores the entire Vaishnava Sampradaya, whether it's Sri Sampradaya or Gaudiya Sampradaya, or any of the bona fide Vaishnava Sampradayas, and makes up something that is complete nonsense. But it sounds good. That's the whole problem. It sounded good for uneducated people. And Prabhupada says, is it possible to surrender to everyone? In other words, Dr. Radhakrishna is saying that goodwill to all. So it's impossible to surrender to everyone. Just try it. Go ahead. When Dr. Radhakrishnan uses the words faith in the Lord, he definitely refers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By what logic does he say Lord but mean the impersonal Brahman? Arjuna certainly means the person Krishna when he says in Bhagavad Gita, Sisyasteham sadimam tvam prapanam. Now I am your disciple, and a soul surrendered unto you. Please instruct me. With these words, he addresses Krishna at the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita. At this stage of the Gita, the impersonal Brahman is still to be discussed by the Lord. When the subject of the impersonal Brahman is finally raised, Lord Krishna unequivocally declares that he is the source of the impersonal Brahman. Sound logic says that one cannot surrender to something impersonal and formless. Those who are overly attached to the impersonal Brahman will find surrendering to this formless concept very painful and indeed impossible. And if they persist along this path, they will end up surrendering to their wife, family, and relatives. I see Prabhupada is unbelievably witty. So, because Dr. Radhakrishnan, in a previous place here, he says that when one should not surrender to Krishna, but to the unseen and impersonal reality behind Krishna or within Krishna. So in other words, he's separating Krishna from the Brahma Jyoti, and he's saying that the Brahma Jyoti basically is the source of Krishna, and that you don't have to listen to what Krishna says, you listen to what the unknown impersonal says. So let me show you where he says that, 163. See, Prabhupada is going to great lengths to reveal. Once one of the brahmacharis of our ashrama met Dr. Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan, who is a spiritualist of sorts and an erudite scholar. Dr. Radhakrishnan is the Vice President of India, as I write this essay. Was he later on president? Did he ever become president? Maybe not. So he's Vice President. Dr. Radhakrishnan is the Vice President of India, and as I write this essay. On meeting him, our brahmachari received from him a copy of his Bhagavad Gita as a gift. Dr. Radhakrishnan had translated Gita into English and written a commentary on it, and it sold well on the market for 10 rupees in those days, 1954. The brahmachari read the book and came to us a little dissatisfied, though the book itself was deeply esoteric. The reason for his dissatisfaction was that Dr. Radhakrishnan's writing lacked spiritual insight. In many places, he had mishandled and misinterpreted the text, and thus he had made his book unacceptable to the spiritualists in the line of pure devotion. This is a perfect example of Srimad Bhagavatam's statement 1.1.1, that by him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion. Muyanti yat suraya. When the Lord so easily bewilders Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, Lord Indra, and other great universal controllers, is it not at all surprising that Dr. Radhakrishnan is placed into illusion? The brahmachari was especially shocked and hurt by Dr. Radhakrishnan's misinterpretation of text 34 of chapter 9 of the Bhagavad Gita, which appears in his book on page 254. He came to us very depressed, wanting to discuss this passage. The following words were found in the book. It is not the personal Krishna to whom we have to give ourselves up utterly, but to the unborn, beginningless, eternal, who speaks through Krishna. We have not this, Prabhupada writes, this is Radhakrishna's mistranslation of 934, which says, Man manabhava mad bhakto madhyachimam namaskru man vaisi yuktvaivam atmanam tat parayanaha. Right? That verse is repeated twice in 934 and 1865. So we have not the slightest intention of confronting a world-famous philosopher like Dr. Radhakrishnan with arguments. Yet, on the Brahmacharya's repeated request, we have to scrutinize the text and point out the discrepancies. We have great respect for Dr. Radhakrishnan, not only because he is the vice president of our country, but also because of his scholarship and his position as an erudite master of Hindu philosophy. Furthermore, he is faithful to the Brahminical tradition he hails from and is a follower of the Mayavada school, going by the oft-quoted dictum that it is better to have a learned enemy than a foolish friend. I feel encouraged in this matter. An intelligent opponent will present reasonable rebuttals, but an ignorant friend may bring about disaster with his floundering. Therefore, we feel no compunction about strongly arguing against the points Dr. Radhakrishnan makes in his Bhagavad Gita commentary. A well-known Bengali saying goes, after reading the whole Ramayana, you want to know whose father Sita is. So, was Sita the father of anybody? This question is ludicrous, since Sita is Lord Rama's wife, and thus such a query will naturally invite quips and laughter. We find the same absurdity in Dr. Radhakrishnan's English commentary on the Gita. He writes that we do not have to surrender to the person Krishna, but to the unborn, beginningless, eternal within Krishna. This implies that Lord Krishna and his inner self are two separate identities. According to Dr. Radhakrishnan, since there is a difference between Krishna's body and his soul, we must surrender to Krishna's soul and not his body. This new discovery in the field of religious philosophy reminds us of the Pandita of the Ramayana referring to above. In other words, whose father is Sita, right? Lord Sri Krishna's sole purpose in speaking the Bhagavad Gita is to convince us to surrender to his lotus feet. Yet right at the outset, Dr. Radhakrishnan is unwilling to accept this point. Lord Krishna gives this central instruction in Bhagavad Gita 1866, Sarvadharma parityaja mamikam saranam vraja. Abandoning all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. Lord Krishna spoke these words to Arjuna so that he would surrender to him. The Sanskrit word saranam in this Gita text means surrender. On page 62 of his introductory essay, Dr. Radhakrishnan has also discussed the idea of surrender in some detail. So, this is the dilemma of India today, and it has been for a long time, since the time of Sankaracharya and Sarirak Bhasya, that, and even before that, Mayavad philosophy existed. This misinterpretation, giving fanciful interpretation. Yes. I have to come up here. Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. All right. So this is the problem that we have today, and it's been spread all over the world. There's false interpretations of the Shastra. And once people become convinced of these false interpretations, it's hard to bring them back to the reality. In fact, they become advocates of it, just like this student in the University of Washington tried to convince me that everything I said, with everything Prabhupada said, right, was wrong, because Sadhguru told him. So this is our problem today, and we have to be determined to defeat it. Just like Prabhupada praised Dr. Radhakrishna and then basically explained that he was a fool. But he did it in a very educated way. And he says it's better to have an intelligent enemy than a foolish enemy. Because a foolish enemy will get angry, take a gun, and shoot you. The intelligent enemy will get upset, but if he has any intelligence, he'll accept your superior explanation. Just like Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was defeated by Lord Chaitanya's superior explanation. Prakasananda Saraswati was defeated by Lord Chaitanya's superior explanation of the Vedas. Okay, we'll stop right there. Are there any questions?
Yes, Maharaj.
Yeah.
You mentioned that Parikshit Maharaj could have counteracted the curse. But elsewhere we know that the curse of Brahmin can never be counteracted. So how can you reconcile that? And also,
Lord Chaitanya
which way could he do?
Lord Chaitanya counteracted the curse of a Brahmana. You know that. In Chaitanya Charitamrita. You don't know that?
He didn't.
Yeah, some Brahmana cursed him, broke his Brahman thread and cursed him.
Yeah, what was with the curse then?
Well, the result was, Prabhupada explains in that part of Chaitanya Charitamrita, that even the curse of a Brahma cannot affect the devotee who is fully engaged in devotional service.
I thought that a devotee, because he's transcendental.
What's stronger, the holy mantra or the curse of a bogus Brahmana?
No, it is a curse of, that is the, we're talking about true Brahmin, because we have an example like Agastya Muni, curse in the Duna Maharaj, and so forth, and so many things. But what the idea is that a devotee never retaliate to the curse. That's what I know. He accepts. Another thing, Lord Chaitanya accepted he was cursed. The Brahmin cursed him that he would never have a family life or something like this. And the Lord
We have to look it up. I'm not sure.
Okay. So, very funny. Okay, about the curse of Brahmin being counteracted.
Well, first of all, the son of Samika Runi was not a bona fide Brahmana. He made a mistake. It was not, and even his father explained to him he made a mistake. His father was not disturbed by what Parikshit did, and therefore it was inappropriate for him to curse Maharaj Parikshit. Inappropriate for his son to curse him.
No, because when the boy did that, his father was very, very against it. But the father couldn't do anything about it. So the boy was Shringi. He was, he actually was qualified Brahmin boy. He was not Brahma Bandhu. He was qualified Brahmin boy. But he's been accused for being childish or he did something inappropriate, but he had the power, I think. That's why the curse actually took place.
Well, let's take a look here. One second. It's an interesting point. Brahmana's son cursed. 692. Well, we're going to see, it's going to be explained here. Mm-hmm. One second, let me just look quickly. If I don't find it, then we'll discuss this later on. Okay, so in Canto 1, Chapter 18, verse number 42. O my boy, your intelligence is immature, and therefore you have no knowledge that the king, who is the best amongst human beings, is as good as the personality of Godhead. He is never to be placed on an equal footing with common men. The citizens of the state live in prosperity, being protected by his unsurpassable prowess. My dear boy, the Lord who carries the wheel of a chariot is represented by the monarchical regime, and when this regime is abolished, the whole world becomes filled with thieves, who then at once vanquish the unprotected subjects like scattered lambs. Okay, and then he says, due to the termination of monarchical regimes and the plundering of the people's wealth by rogues and thieves, there will be great social disruption. People will be killed and injured, and animals and women will be stolen, and for all of these sins we shall be responsible. So, then later on, he's explaining that, he should not have cursed.
Yeah, he was blamed for that. Yeah,
He prayed
because
to
it was childish.
Then he prays that to Krishna that he should pardon his immature son,
Right.
who had no intelligence and who committed the great sin of cursing a person who was completely free from all sins, who was subordinate, and who deserved to be protected. Okay, so now, when an offense is done unto the devotee of the Lord, it is very difficult to overcome the reaction. The Brahmana, being at the head of the social orders, are meant to give protection to their subordinates and not to curse them.
Mm-hmm.
There are occasions when a Brahmana may furiously curse a subordinate Kshatriya or Vaishya, etc. But in the case of Maharaj Parikshit, there were no grounds, as already explained. The foolish boy had done it out of sheer vanity in being a Brahmana's son, and thus he became liable to be punished by the law of God. The Lord never forgives a person who condemns his pure devotee. Therefore, by cursing a king, the foolish Shringi had committed not only a sin, but also the greatest offense. Therefore, the Rishi could foresee that only the Supreme Personality of Godhead could save his boy from his sinful act. He therefore directly prayed for pardon from the Supreme Lord, who alone can undo a thing which is impossible to change. The appeal was made in the name of a foolish boy who had developed no intelligence at all. A question may be raised herein, that since it was the desire of the Lord that Parikshit Maharaj be put into that awkward position so that he might be delivered from material existence, then why was a Brahmana's son made responsible for this offensive act? The answer is that the offensive act was performed by a child only, so that he could be excused very easily, and thus the prayer of the father was accepted. But if the question is raised why the Brahmana community as a whole was made responsible for allowing Kali into the world affairs, the answer is given in the Varaha Purana, that the demons who acted inimically toward the personality of Godhead, but were not killed by the Lord, were allowed to take birth in the families of Brahmanas to take advantage of the age of Kali. The all-merciful Lord gave them a chance to have their births in the families of pious Brahmanas so that they could progress towards salvation. But the demons, instead of utilizing the good opportunity, misused the Brahminical culture to being puffed up by vanity in becoming Brahmanas.
Oh, that point comes again, yeah?
Yeah, there it is.
Of a Brahmin, demons and
Yes.
born Brahmin family.
The typical example is the son of Samika Rishi, and all the foolish sons of Brahmanas are warned hereby not to become as foolish as Shringi and be always on guard against the demoniac qualities which they had in their previous births. The foolish boy was, of course, excused by the Lord, but others, who may not have a father like Samika Rishi, will be put into great difficulty if they misuse the advantages obtained by birth in a Brahmana family. Okay, so the devotees of the Lord are so forbearing that even though they are defamed, cheated, cursed, disturbed, neglected, or even killed, they are never inclined to avenge themselves. Rishi Samika also knew that the Lord does not forgive a person who has committed an offense at the feet of a devotee. The Lord can only give direction to take shelter of the devotee. He thought within himself that if Maharaj Pariksit would counter-curse the boy, he might be saved. But he knew that also that a pure devotee is callous about worldly advantages or reverses. As such, the devotee, see, if a pure devotee counter-curses the boy, in other words, Maharaj Pariksit had the power to do that. He didn't use it. But he knew also that a pure devotee is callous about worldly advantages or reverses. As such, the devotees are never inclined to counteract personal defamation, curses, negligence, etc. As far as such things are concerned, in personal affairs, the devotees do not care for them. But in the case of their being performed against the Lord and his devotees, then the devotees take very strong action. It was a personal affair, and therefore Samika Rishi knew that the king would not take counteraction. You see, he had the power to do it. He could have counteracted Samika Rishi, but he didn't do it because he's a pure devotee, and he accepted the situation as the mercy of the Lord for him to end his worldly affairs and go back to Godhead. So it was a personal affair, and therefore Samika Rishi knew that the king would not take counteraction. Thus, there was no alternative than to place an appeal to the Lord for the immature boy. And because the boy was young and foolish, he was excused, even though he committed an offense that if he was older, he wouldn't be excused. He would have been severely punished by the Lord, or Maharaj Pariksit would have counteracted. Yeah.
But the point is, so it's just like...
It is not only the Brahmanas are powerful enough to award curses or blessings upon the subordinates. The devotee of the Lord, even though he may not be a Brahmana, is more powerful than a Brahmana. But a powerful devotee never misuses the power for personal benefit. Whatever power the devotee may have is always utilized in service toward the Lord and his devotees only. So he had the power to do it, to counteract it.
You see the point, that there's never one instance that a devotee can counteract any curse, like in case of Ambarish Maharaj.
Okay, there's another point though, and that I have to find in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that when Lord Chaitanya was cursed by the Brahmana, it did not act on him. So I have to find that. We'll discuss that tomorrow.
Okay.
But here it's very clear that Maharaj Pariksit had the power to counteract him. No doubt about it. And that's Canto 1, Chapter 18, verse number 48.
Is an Srila Prabhupada purport, yeah?
Yeah. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hari Bol.